This is Stephen Kotler, and you're listening to Your Superior Self.
This is Christina Rasmussen, and this is Your Superior Self.
Hi, this is Dave Meltzer, and this is Your Superior Self.
Hi, I'm Anita Murjani, and this is Your Superior Self.
Hi, this is Paul Selig, and this is Your Superior Self.
What's up, everybody? I'm Aubrey Marcus, and this is Your Superior Self.
What is up, beautiful people? I'm Trey Downs, and this is Your Superior Self. Thank you guys so much for taking the time to hang out with me today. I really do appreciate it. If you haven't already, please hit subscribe and leave a rating and a review. It helps me scale the podcast. It helps me get this out to those who may need it the most. And I think a lot of people need to hear about today's episode with Dr. Glenn Livingston. He is the author of the book Never Binge Again, and his work is very important because it talks about binge eating, his journey with binge eating, his binge recovery, and some ways that we can help kind of understand why we do certain things and how we can create a external, feasible process that helps us understand and get the cravings under control. So a little bit more about Dr. Livingston. He's a veteran psychologist and was a longtime CEO of a multi-million-dollar consulting firm. Disillusioned by what traditional psychology had to offer overweight and or food-obsessed individuals, Dr. Livingston spent several decades researching the nature of binging and overeating via work with his own patients and a self-funded research program with more than 40,000 participants. Most important, however, was his own personal journey out of obesity and food prison to a normal, healthy weight in a much more lighthearted relationship with food. And we talked about that in the episode. And his story is amazing. It's very powerful how he owns it and how he brings it to light so that others may learn. And here's a little clip of that.
Given my psychological background, I'd thought that maybe there was a hole in my heart, a metaphorical hole in my heart. And if I could figure out how to fill that hole in my heart, then I wouldn't have to keep trying to fill the hole in my stomach. And I went at it from that approach for, years and years and years. I went to Overeaters Anonymous. I went to see the best psychologists and psychiatrists, and I'd be sitting with these couples, and they'd be recovering from having discovered an affair with one another, and I'd be thinking, well, when can I get to the deli and dislodge my jaw and empty the contents of the tray in it, or when can I get the next pizza? And that bothered me more than the weight that I was gaining because, like I said, I always really wanted to be a great psychologist.
Wow, that's pretty powerful. And thank you, Dr. Livingston, for making yourself vulnerable enough to put that work out there and being transparent with your journey. I just think it's so impactful when people who have actually walked the walk and have a background in behavior science can come forth and put out this type of work to help us better understand what our bodies are doing in situations that we can't control. So I think this is very impactful. Episode, I want to remind everyone of my sacred activism. Sacred activism is the terminology that is coined by the poet Dr. Andrew Harvey, and I've just recently stumbled upon his work. And it's the idea of go out there and be of service of the thing that breaks your heart, like absolutely breaks your heart. Mine is children suffering, and I cannot stand to see that. It really bothers me. It really breaks my heart, and I try my best to go out there and be of service to that. And one way that I can do that is by bringing more awareness about local nonprofits in Baltimore or anywhere. Please feel free to reach out to me if you have a great cause that you want to help and be of service to by bringing more awareness to that. But today, Today, I want to talk about Baltimore Hunger Project, a nonprofit that has really helped out a lot of children in the Baltimore city. They've helped raise 41,000 weekend bags of food for children in the city and county, to help them strengthen their bodies, empower their minds, and help build communities and help bringing them together and helping them become the best person that they can be by just feeding them one child at a time. And I think you would be surprised at how far your money will go if you donate to this organization. $25 will feed a child for an entire month. $100 will feed a child for an entire school semester, and $250 will feed a child for the entire school year. And that's on weekends, Friday through Monday, making sure that these kids are eating on the weekends and getting the nutrition that they need for the school year, helping them feel loved from outside, that the world cares about them. And if you want to find out more about this amazing nonprofit, you can go to baltimorehungerproject.org, or you can search them on all social media platforms. They're everywhere. They have 1,500 volunteers. So far, they've totaled 6,500 hours of service and 41,000 weekend bags distributed. Amazing. Great work. I have donated to this project, and I am very proud that this is something that is local here in Baltimore. And if you guys have any other stories of outside in the areas that you live that you want to recognize, give me a shout. You can go to traydowns.com, leave me a message, let me know what these areas, what these projects are doing, so that I can recognize them and help with my sacred activism of helping and bringing more awareness to children suffering. So let's get this thing started. Let's get after it. Here is the great and powerful Dr. Glenn Livingston.
This is the very good Dr. Glenn Livingston, and you're listening to Your Superior Self.
Oh, man. Perfection.
Okay.
Dr. Livingston, I want to say thank you for taking the time and hang out with me today.
Thank you for hanging out with me. It's always a pleasure.
So, man, there's so many things I want to talk to you about. So your experience, your background's in psychology, right? Like what'd you major in college? Like, what was your,
I knew I wanted to be a psychologist since I was an infant, basically. Now, my dad's a psychologist. My mom's a psychotherapist. My sister, my stepmom, everybody. If something broke in the house, we all know how to ask it how it felt, and nobody knew how to fix it. So that was my life.
Yeah, because I'm going back to school. Like I'm majoring in, I'm minoring in psychology. However, psychology is something that I'm very passionate about. Like I didn't realize that I was passionate about it until like I became curious about it and just everything surrounding that. Even like I didn't realize that psychology was so just like consciousness related, right? Like just the parapsychology and the what is it? Stan, what is his name? Transpersonal psychology. Those areas interest me the most. However, in college, you don't find so many colleges with transpersonal psychology majors.
That's true.
So I've been kind of looking at counseling psychology. What was your, like when you went to psychology, like, did you so explain that? Were you like, a psychiatrist? Did you just, what area of psychology did you study?
I studied clinical psychology. I'm really only kidding about knowing it. I'm only half kidding about wanting to do that since I was a kid. When my dad would go to work, I'd sneak down to his office in the basement and I'd invite my friends over and I'd tell them to lie down on the couch and tell me about their mother. So I really wanted to sit in a room with people and talk and make them better. I really wanted to make people feel better by talk therapy. And the particular area that I studied was child and family therapy. And the modality was depth psychology. So my father was a more classical psychoanalyst, and that really evolved into a wide variety of different therapies over the years. And, I studied extensively what you might have called modern analysis, which had to do with the constructive use of aggression, how to reverse self-destructive trends in people, get people better despite themselves, that kind of thing. Um, but what I wound up doing was very different. I had a very different career than I had originally planned, because I wound up marrying a marketer, and then we saw a unique opportunity for me to help the companies that she was working with to really understand the values and emotional drivers of purchase, so that they could be more consistent with their brand efforts, and um, and at the same time, she traveled for business, and so I had a lot of time on my hands. So I developed a dual career. So I had my clinical practice with couples and families, and then I did a lot of corporate consulting, and it was a whole bunch of twists and turns, and kind of wound up with me, when we got divorced, having to close everything down because we were very involved with the businesses together. And I wrote a book about my own personal journey through obesity and out, and it was not what anybody thought it was going to be, and it took off. So that's what I do now. I help people to overcome overeating in much simpler ways than they think it's going to be. So that's what I do now.
We just went from like 0 to 100 in like 3 seconds. Going back to clinical and corporate, right? Like consulting, what was your favorite?
I always much preferred sitting with real people. I worked a lot with couples, and it was very painful and hard work to do, but
Painful.
oh God, yeah. I mean, sitting in a room with two people screaming at each other all day is not my idea of a good
I
time.
thought clinical was more so like with some, I thought the main difference between clinical and counseling, right? I thought counseling was more like sitting with couples, where clinical was more dealing with like schizophrenia and things like that.
It's semantic.
Yeah.
It depends where you want to draw the line. So I would start by doing counseling with couples. You could say I was doing counseling with couples, and I worked with a few hundred of them, and they never got divorced, which was, except for one
That's
couple.
awesome.
It was hard. It was really hard.
I bet.
And
But what was the common factor between the two? Like, I mean, was there common factors that you found that was able for you to save them?
What happens with most couples is that they don't really understand what communication is. People they confuse expression with communication. So a guy comes home at night and he says, "You made effing meatloaf for dinner again. I can't believe you made effing meatloaf. I told you I hate effing meatloaf."
You can say fuck. It's fine.
Fuck. No, I'm a potty mouth doctor. And he thinks that he's communicated to his wife, but he really hasn't. He's really just complained and criticized, and he hasn't given her any direction with regards to what would make him happy. He hasn't really respected her in any way. And so, as simple as it sounds, largely what I would do is interrupt people and kind of, go back to asking them what they wanted, and show them the difference in effectiveness of the different types of communication, and by continually focusing people on what they want as opposed to what they didn't want, and interrupting when they got in the other direction, I found that couples got better. They got better.
That's awesome. And then the book, so you got a divorce, and the book came after the divorce?
Yeah. So we are really summarize everything in 3 seconds.
Sure.
I spent 30 years suffering with overeating myself. So I would be sitting with these couples, and when I was a kid, I'm 6'4", I'm modestly muscular, and So I could get away with eating an awful lot. And as long as I exercised for a couple hours a day, it was no problem. So if you'd ever been to the Woodbury Country Deli and they were out of pizza or Pop-Tarts, then I was probably there before you.
Mhm.
But it wasn't a problem when I was a kid. It was more like a superpower. And I just spent a lot of time, eating and exercising and pooping, honestly. Uh, but when I got older and I was working with these couples and I was commuting 2 hours in each direction to graduate school, and I was married and, helping her run the business, and she actually wanted to talk to me in the evening. I just didn't have time to work out like that anymore. My metabolism was slowing, but I found I couldn't stop eating the way that I'd been eating. And that went on for quite some time. And given my psychological background, I'd thought that maybe there was a hole in my heart, a metaphorical hole in my heart. And if I could figure out how to fill that hole in my heart, then I wouldn't have to keep trying to fill the hole in my stomach. And I went at it from that approach for, years and years and years. I went to Overeaters Anonymous. I went to see the best psychologists and psychiatrists. And, I'd be sitting with these couples and, they'd be recovering from having discovered an affair with one another. And I'd be thinking, well, when can I get to the deli and dislodge my jaw and empty the contents of the tray in it? Or when can I get the next pizza? And that bothered me more than the weight that I was gaining because, like I said, I always really wanted to be a great psychologist. And, eventually as the years went by and I was doing the corporate consulting on top of my clinical work, I started to understand a bunch of things about overeating that led me to the conclusion that it didn't really have to do with whether I love myself enough. See, first of all, these corporations are engineering these hyper palatable concentrations of starch and sugar and fat and oil and excitotoxins. And it's all aimed at hitting our bliss point without giving us enough nutrition to feel satisfied.
Mhm.
And that's an outside force that has nothing to do with your upbringing. It has nothing to do with your current situation. If you're in a bad marriage, whatever it is, it's, that's a very overwhelming outside force. And then the thing that I really learned was that the part of the brain that's responsible for food addiction, which we believe is the reptilian brain, the part that's responsible for feast and famine, it's an overactivation of that part of the brain. That part of the brain doesn't know love. The reptilian brain looks at something in the environment and it's like a bad college drinking game. It says, do I eat it? Do I mate with it? Or do I kill it? It's not until we evolve the mammalian brain and the neocortex that we started to say, wait a minute, before I eat, mate, or kill that thing, what impact is that going to have on the people that I love and my higher goals and my spirituality, my music and my art and the kind of person that I want to be in the world, which is a very, very primitive response to an overwhelming stimulus. And I began to think to myself, after also reading some alternative addiction treatment literature, in particular, I read a book called Rational Recovery, which talked about the two parts of the brain. I began to think that I was going to have to dominate my reptilian brain more so than nurture my inner child back to health. So it wasn't an inner wounded child that I have to love more. It was more like an organ in my body that I'd have to take control over. The same way that I do with my bladder. If I'm sitting here and talking to you in a business meeting and I'm recording something and I really have to pee, which I don't, but if I did, I would still finish the business meeting and I would tell my bladder, look, I'm not going to ignore you, but we're going to feed you in a particular way, in a particular place, at a particular time, and take care of those authentic needs. And so I realized I had to be more like the alpha wolf asserting control than a nurturing guy taking care of my inner wounded child. And so now I'm almost back to the present. So what really turned things around for me when I'd gotten, to probably about 280 pounds, I stopped weighing myself at about 257. but I think I was probably about 280. It wasn't the doctors yelling at me about my triglycerides or telling me I could die by the time I'm 40 or anything like that. What really turned things around for me was when I decided to make a really clear line between healthy and unhealthy behavior. So for example, I would say I will never have chocolate on a weekday again. And then if I heard a little voice in my head saying, gee, Glenn, that chocolate bar at the coffee counter, you could have a little bit because you worked out really hard and it's not going to affect your weight. And you could always start again tomorrow. And besides, chocolate grows on a plant and a cocoa bean, and therefore it's a vegetable. I would say that's not me. That's my inner pig. I call my reptilian brain my inner pig. I know that's a little crude, but I did. And chocolate on a weekday is pig slop. And I don't eat pig slop, and I don't let farm animals tell me what to do. And as crazy as it sounds for a sophisticated psychologist like me, I guess you read in my bio, it's kind of embarrassing, but that's what started to wake me up at the moment of impulse and give me those microseconds to make the right choice. And it wasn't a miracle. Like I still overeat sometimes. I still made the wrong choice sometimes, but I no longer felt powerless and confused. It would kind of remind me of my free will, remind me of why I made the rule in the first place. And slowly but surely, I started to create rules that I was willing to follow. And I got thin,
That's awesome. No, it's kind of like me, right? So I struggle with anxiety, and which leads to like depression sometimes, right? So, but for me, what helps me out is like knowing the biology of it, right? Just knowing that I know that it's going to be this different release of chemicals, cortisol in my body, and finding out, just identifying that, right? Like when I'm feeling bad or having a bad day, I'm like, shit, man. I'm like, man, I just can't get out of this funk. And it's like, is it me? Like, and then I have to like take a step back and look at myself, right? Like turn the brain in on itself and say, all right, well, now your body's flowing with different levels of cortisol, right? Like you're not feeling any good chemicals. Something has triggered this. And then I try to, figure out what it is. Essentially, it could be something that is, an argument that I had somebody, not even an argument, but something has triggered something unconsciously in me, or something that is, something that I have stored from either, I don't know if that makes sense, but it's like, I kind of identify the chemicals that are released in my body that are making me feel like that. And then identifying that as, as the body itself, not me as who I am. Does that make sense? Like, is that something that, does that sound like, is it, I guess it's kind of similar to what you're doing.
But you are that, feelings are a physiological experience.
Sure.
And that they're temporary. I have a mantra where I say feelings aren't facts. You might feel like everything is horrible right now. That doesn't mean that everything actually is horrible. You're probably having a memory, and feelings aren't facts. And first of all, how can you take care of your body? Do you need some exercise? Do you need some water? Do you need a big green smoothie to get some more of the right chemicals flowing through your body? And the inner negative self will be telling you that these feelings are going to last forever, and that the only solution would be to do something self-destructive, like eat way too much ice cream or something like that,
or drink a ton of beer,
Yeah. There you go.
Same thing, right? Like because I mean, that happened to me too, right? Like I feel like I get into a spot, anxiety or depression, or just stress the fuck out, right? Like, I mean, we're going through COVID, the kids are being homeschooled, and there are times where I just stress the fuck out, and it's like, it's not just one thing that triggers it. It's a bunch of shit, right? That you just don't deal with in the moment, that you wait, and it just gathers up, and you pile it up throughout the day, and then it's one little thing. It could be a kid like, just screaming, or a kid not cooperating with doing homework, and you fucking explode. But you need to realize that it's not that one thing that has produced that. It's a bunch of things. And now your body is producing this type of chemical that is making you feel like shit. And you kind of step back and you look at it and say, and you call it what it is. and then you can kind of deal with it. But what I used to do was like, I just thought it was me. I was like, oh man, something's wrong with me.
There's something wrong with me. I'm
Yeah.
broken. My brain doesn't work. It's always going to be like this.
Mm-hmm.
And yes.
And then even like growing up, right? Like I've been learning so much. Like I'm just so thankful for the world of psychology and the studies and the journals and things like that. Like I've just been really like learning a lot of new shit. Because I also thought that growing up, like my learning was fixed. I thought it was like I had this limit. I couldn't go past it, right? Like intellectually, I couldn't go past it. And then like I just got done doing an article, journal review on the effects of praise on kids, right? Like if you have this entity mindset where you praise a kid, hey, good girl, and they have this fixed mindset of they can only achieve so much because of their fixed abilities, whereas somebody who has, like, Carol Dweck talks about the growth mindset and how it's not time yet if you're failing. I just think that it's so important, and I just want to scream out the top of buildings about the growth mindset. And it's helped me where I'm at, right? Like where I'm at today, where if I fuck up, right? Like if I mess up, or if I binge drink, or if I binge eat or whatever, binge rage on the kids or something like that, like I'm not where I need to be, right? Like, and not like feel shameful about that. But there's always time. There's always room for growth. There's always, like, you're always growing, and it's like, you know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Well, there's a critical mindset shift that most people need to take about mistakes, particularly, I work with people that are struggling with food all the time. But most people, for example, when they make a mistake, they'll say, why can't I stop eating? Why can't I stop overeating? And they don't recognize that by asking that question in and of itself, they're instructing their brain to look for evidence that they can't stop overeating. And they're spending their mental energy collecting evidence of failure. And if you do that, you'll develop a failure identity. If you ask yourself instead, what did I do right? Did I have 5 cupcakes instead of 15? Was I able to stop within an hour? Did I get myself to have a salad afterwards to help the bad food move through my system? Then you're starting to collect evidence of success. And if you collect that evidence of success, then you'll build a success identity over time, and you'll learn from every single mistake. If you look at what an Olympic archer does, they aim with perfection, but they forgive themselves with dignity. When they're aiming at the bullseye, they don't let go of the arrow until they can actually see it going into the bullseye itself. They have to feel one with the arrow. They have to feel like they're right. But if they miss, they don't say, God damn it, I'm a pathetic archer and I'm just going to shoot the rest of the arrows up into the air or into the audience or something like that. They figure out, by how much did I miss? They look at the archery target and they say, in what direction and how far did I miss by? And is that because of the air resistance that I didn't account for? Do I need to adjust my stance? Do I need to pull back harder? And they will let go of the previous mistake and aim with perfection again. So we call it aiming with perfection and forgiving yourself with dignity. What most people do with food or drinking is just the opposite. They'll make a mistake. They'll set out towards the goal saying progress, not perfection, which is the right mindset when you're analyzing a mistake that you made. But if you are saying, well, maybe I'll make it, maybe I'll hit the bullseye, maybe I won't, I'll just do the best I can, that turns out to not be the psychology of a winner. The psychology of a winner sees the arrow going into the bullseye and they aim with perfection, with a perfect commitment. But then they let go of that perfectionism when they're analyzing their mistakes. And so it all kind of ties together in collecting evidence of success, like you were saying. Now, here's the critical insight. It turns out in food, for example, that when you make a mistake and you allow that negative critical voice to keep going, that negative critical voice is actually your pig trying to make you feel too weak to resist the next binge. It's actually binge motivated, and it's very difficult to keep binging if you refuse to yell at yourself. You want to feel a little bit of pain, Like you want to feel a little bit of guilt and shame, just a little bit, enough to get your attention so you can assess how far you missed the target by. So you're actually going to make that assessment, and don't walk around being numb to the mistake. But once you've got your attention, and once you've learned what you can and you're moving forward, then it's not really healthy to hold on to that guilt and shame. It's important to let it go.
Now you talk about the inner pig. Is that the ego as well?
It's a different concept. It's the definition of the pig is any thought, feeling, impulse, or image that suggests that you're going to cross the line that you've drawn for yourself, between now and forever. And basically any thought that says, forget about your plans, let's do this instead. It's important not to really think of it as a part of yourself that you're trying to reintegrate or re-own. So it's not like your shadow in the transpersonal work, or some disowned part of self and Gestalt. It's an errant thought process that supports a biological drive that's been hijacked by industry. That's what I like to say. Well, because every time that you're looking for love at the bottom of a bag or a box or a container, there's some fat cat in a white suit with a mustache that's laughing all the way to the bank, right?
Yeah, it's cashing that check.
Yeah. So I mean, I'm very interested in shadow work. I'm very interested in helping people reintegrate parts of themselves, but it's a separate endeavor. I really like people to think of overeating, or really any addictive behavior. I like to think of them to think of it as nothing more than a really bad habit. It might be extremely well entrenched. It might seem really hard to fix, but when you get involved with all of these depth psychological explanations, the danger is then you think, well, I can't possibly get better until I reintegrate my ego, or I can't possibly get better until I, experience those childhood wounds and, cry about it and figure out what happened and, tell it to a therapist. And then the problem behavior goes on for years. Whereas there's some very simple things you can do to address the behavior and the bad habit so that you don't suffer the consequences of it. And it actually turns out that the pig slop, or the junk food, that actually reinforces the bad feelings. People think, oh, I'm eating to numb out, I'm eating to comfort myself. And there's a little bit of that that's true, because it's hard for the nervous system to conduct emotions when it's overloaded with digestive tasks. And thank you, Doug Graham, for that insight. But when you have a feeling, when you have a particular feeling, and then you reward yourself after having that feeling. So let's say you feel anxious, and your conscious perception is that when you feel so anxious, if you don't, eat some flour or something really heavy, that you're not going to be able to sleep. Well, you've just given yourself a reward for feeling anxious. You don't realize that that's what you're doing, but you're doing that. And if you look at some of the animal studies on that kind of behavior, you could look at anxiety as a physiological experience where your heart races a little bit and your galvanic skin response goes up and your blood pressure goes up a little bit and some of your brain activity goes up. And what they found in the animal studies is that if they give them a sugar treat, for example, when they exhibit some of those physiological symptoms, that those physiological symptoms become conditioned to occur with more frequency. So you can make baboons have consistently higher blood pressure if you give them a treat every time that they demonstrate higher blood pressure. You can get cats breathing heavier if you give them a treat every time that they breathe a little heavier. You can get yourself, by extension, to feel anxious more frequently if you give yourself a treat whenever you feel anxious. So the food creates the emotions as much as the emotions create the desire for food. So people really need to understand that it goes in both directions. And they also need to understand that what they're usually doing with the food is not numbing out, because, I mean, when was the last time you went to the dentist and they said, hey, I don't have any Novocaine, so I'm just going to inject you with a bagel instead, right? They're not numbing out. They're eating things which are unnatural concentrations of, sugar and salt and fat and oil and all the things we talked about before. And it's almost like they're taking a drug. I tell people we're getting high with food. We're not just eating to numb out, but we're getting high with food. And that's an important shift so that you don't fall prey to the pig saying, oh my God, I'm hurting so much, we really need to numb out and escape from these feelings. You don't start to feel bad for it. Most people don't want to think of themselves like a drug addict. So if they say, I'm getting high with food, I'm not numbing out, then they're less likely to engage in the behavior.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. That's a great point. I think you're right on with that. Is the pig concept, the inner pig, is that in the book as well?
Yeah, that's the whole book.
It's the whole book.
What happened was I kept a journal for about 8 years while I was getting thin. And it was all the things that my pig would say and then how I beat it. So for example, if my pig says, it's just as easy to start tomorrow, we'll just start again tomorrow. I would say, well, wait a minute. The principles of neurology say it's not just as easy to start tomorrow, because when you have a craving, you're either going to reward that craving or frustrate that craving. And you're either always rewarding or extinguishing the addiction. You're making it stronger or weaker. So if I have a craving and I indulge it today, I'm digging a deeper hole for myself to get out of tomorrow. It's going to be harder to resist the craving tomorrow. So therefore, I always have to choose the present moment to be healthy. So I kept a journal with all those crazy lies the pig would tell me, and that I would research how I could prove those lies to be false and disempower them. And largely that's what the book is about. It's also about some of the general principles that we talked about, but it's mostly me versus my inner pig, and it's written more like an allegory than a scientific treatise or a pop psychology book. And I had no idea people were going to resonate with it this much. It's it's got 8,000 reviews on Amazon, and I guess so. Now people don't necessarily recognize me by name in a bookstore, but sometimes they'll see my face and they'll know who I am, and they'll come up and point at me and go, "Pig guy, pig guy." That's the pig guy.
What's that quote from? I can't remember what it is now. Was it Howard Stern? What he calls his balls?
I don't know what Howard Stern calls his balls, but I once got kicked off his show. So.
Oh, that's awesome. What was a bad day for you? Like in the binging days, like what was a bad day?
Oh, what wasn't a bad day? Going through 7 different drive-throughs so that nobody would know how much I was eating. Taking a coffee cake and burying it in the garbage so that I wouldn't eat it, then going and getting it again, and doing unspeakable things to it so that I really wouldn't eat it. So, eating off the floor, taking my roommate's food without telling him.
So was this when you were married too, or was this after the divorce?
No, I had mostly stopped binging by the time I had gotten divorced. I'm only divorced for, I guess, 4.5 years now. I overcame binging. It wasn't a miraculous moment. It was more like a process over a couple of years. But I overcame binging in my early to mid 40s, and I'm now approaching my late 50s. So it's about 10 years ago that I really put this all together.
Man, it is a process, right? Like it's not something that, like you said, it happens overnight. I mean, it's finding that. It's like trying to find, like, work with it. It's not like this answer, right? Like, I don't know.
The miracle was that I no longer felt powerless and confused. Up until that point, I felt like there was this mysterious force within me, almost like someone was pointing a gun to my head at the refrigerator and saying, eat. And I couldn't figure out why I would wake up in the morning and feel like this was going to be the day that I got it all together. And then by 3:00 in the afternoon, it had 10,000 calories already. I just couldn't figure that out.
What was the biggest, like, the weight, like how big did you get it at the biggest?
Probably about 280.
280.
Which, it's not gigantic. Sometimes I tell people, if I'd known what a badge of honor it was going to be to lost a bunch of weight, then I would have gained more first. It wasn't gigantic. The bigger danger to me was that my triglycerides were climbing over 1,000 at one point. And, every up and down the line in my family, everybody was having heart attacks and strokes. So I really was in danger. And that was the biggest deal. That was the biggest sign.
Well, I mean, 280, right? Like, I mean, it's not even about the weight. It's about the habit. It's about what you're doing, right? Like it's healing on both sides of that. Like you were talking about the emotional and the addiction. Are you working with people that are binge eating right now? You wrote the book. Is that what your practice is?
Yeah. I think of it more as a company than a practice, because I want to help 1 million people a year to stop overeating. And I built a clinical practice before, and it was very meaningful to be a country doctor, but I'm trying to do a lot more. So we have I've got 2 business partners, and we've developed a coaching network. I've got 7 coaches that work with me. And, depending upon the month, we get anywhere between 50 and 100 new clients that are coming in from having read the book. I wrote 6 more books after the first book, because I discovered there were a lot of specialty topics within binge eating. So yes, that's largely what we do. We run a coaching business, and wrote a bunch of other books, and we're developing an app.
Developing an app. That's interesting. What does that look like?
I'm not supposed to say too much about it yet.
I won't tell anybody, I promise.
Yeah, just the 40,000 people listening. But I will say that this has turned into a very structured process. I'll tell you at the end of the call where people can listen to some recorded coaching sessions for free. And if you listen to those, you'll see that you can really transform people's thinking in one session. And you take them from feeling hopeless and powerless and despairing to feeling enthusiastic and hopeful and excited. And there's a very structured process which you can actually flowchart out and teach other people to do. And so we are installing that process in an app. We also have a workbook which lays it out. So we're installing that in an app, and we're gamifying the whole thing so it's really fun. So, you don't have to call it a pig. You can call it your junkyard dog, or, real pigs in the world are actually sweet animals. So this is just a concept. It's
it's an idea, right? Like it's taking something outside of yourself, right? Like you're seeing it for like you were talking. It's like that. Just like with me when I was growing up, like I thought that I wasn't smart enough to get to a certain point. Like I was a C student. So I was like, I never thought that I could be anything more, right? It's like taking that concept of, hey man, this isn't who you are. This is something else, right? Like, and looking outside of yourself. It's exactly what it's pig concept. It's just, it's putting it on the pig.
And a lot of people who have been criticizing themselves their whole life and feeling incredibly shamed, suddenly when they recognize this is just this thing inside of them, it's like a bodily organ. It's like, it's like your testicles, right? And it screams for release, and you have to take control, otherwise you get in trouble. And people will say, STFU, pig, get back in your cage. And they start to turn the anger in the pig instead, and they feel, people are afraid that their self-esteem is going to go down, but it actually goes up when they are able to do that.
I mean, it's empowering, right? Like one thing it set me on this trajectory of like self-improvement was the idea that there is resistance out there. There's like, there's this negative force out there that is always trying to win the day. And like, I just didn't know, like, there was, I felt like either it was laziness or it was kind of like, I just wasn't motivated. But then like, I read this book, it's called Resisting Happiness. And it was like, there is this negative resistance that is out there, this energy that is trying to demotivate you, that is trying to win your day. And once I kind of wrapped my head around that concept, it motivated me to like, kick the resistance ass. You know what I mean? Like, take it and be empowered with that concept and say, you know what, I'm not going to let this fucking thing like, demotivate me. I'm going to get up, because I know when I'm getting up to go run in the morning, I don't want to leave the bed. It's warm. It's nice, but that's the resistance saying, oh, you don't want to get up. Like, you don't want to get out of bed right now. It's cold. It's 26 degrees out. You don't want to go for a run. And then I'm like, you know what? No, I'm going to go for a run because you're trying to talk me out of it. It's just that same type of concept.
And to recognize that there's nothing wrong with you for having those thoughts and feelings, that it's a part of being human. It's the nature of the animal that we are.
Sure.
And that you can take control over it.
Yeah. That taking control of that, right? Not being a victim to it.
Right.
I think that's so important. Yeah, I love your work. I think it's so phenomenal what you're doing.
Thanks.
Where do you want to go with this? Right? Are you up to 1 million yet? I mean,
we have about 1 million readers total over the last 5 years since I let the book out. We have about 1 million readers total, and it's heating up. So we got double the amount of new readers this year that we did last year, and
well, I feel like a lot of people are struggling with it just because of COVID and everything that's going on.
Oh man, I mean, the business is twice the size once COVID hit, and we really had to scramble to keep up with things because
people were working from home, and what's at home? The kitchen, right? And
well, there's that. There's the availability factor, but we're constantly inundated with fear. Just look at the news, and everybody's focused on how many people are dying, and there was no vaccine. Now there is a vaccine, but it's going to be months before we get it, and everybody is on edge. And when your brain perceives there to be a state of emergency, then the lower centers of the brain are more active, and your lizard brain wants to reign supreme. So I mean, what the things we actually have people do to overcome overeating is to recognize that if you get a case of the efforts, like you make this rule and you really want to follow it, and then for whatever reason you're standing at the pastry shop and something looks good and you go, oh F it, I'm going to do it, let's just do it. You start to teach yourself to take a deep breath at that time. If you breathe in for a count of 7 and out for a count of 11, then you'll be signaling your brain that you're not necessarily in a state of emergency. And that's your first step in deactivating the urgent brain and the sympathetic nervous system, and activating the parasympathetic nervous system that calms you down and gets you ready to rest and digest and think again. And you carry around something to write with, and you write down, okay, pig, why are you saying that I should break my rule now? Give me your specific reason, and you write it down. Even if you don't know why the pig is wrong, just the act of writing it down puts you back in your upper brain, because writing is more of an upper brain function, and binging is lower brain function. And then, but you can ask yourself, why is the pig wrong? When it says, we could just start tomorrow. Well, turns out that if you have a thought and then you eat a treat, you're actually reinforcing that thought. So if you have that cookie when you're saying, I'll just start my diet tomorrow, then you're actually more likely to say, I'll start my diet tomorrow. You're reinforcing the thought itself. So,
wow.
Yeah.
That's some good stuff. I really like that. I like the strategy of going on different, lower brain, higher brain kind of stuff.
We're very, very specific. I really just want to give people practical ideas about how to stop overeating. I don't so much care that their mama didn't love them enough when they were little. I do care, but it's not what I do anymore.
You care. Come on now.
I do. And look, if you guys need a hug, I'll give you a hug,
You better wear a mask. I can tell you that much right now.
I will definitely wear a mask. After COVID, if you need a hug.
And you have to have the vaccine.
Yes. No, I'm a mask wearer. So.
What about kids? Are you seeing an influx in cases of overeating with kids now because of COVID?
We are seeing an influx of that. I don't work with kids directly. Occasionally, it's the same thing that I used to see in my clinical practice. I did work with kids directly then, but I would only work with them when I could work with the parent at the same time. I felt like I had to make an intervention at the family level Otherwise, I couldn't really help the kid. If a child is really asking for help, if they're really struggling and they don't know what to do, then we could help the kid with their parents' permission. But I get a lot of parents saying, I'm really concerned about, my daughter is just blowing up and I don't know what to do. And I'll say, well, the first thing you can do is set a shining example. The best thing you do is show them that it's possible. Be a role model while you can be a role model while they're young enough so that they are absorbing everything you do, and they'll have these memories of, mom or dad fixing the problem themselves. And, then get them talking and try to find out where the pain is. And then if they're interested, you can start to just teach them about it or to hand them the book or something like that. It's funny. I go shopping for produce at this really cool little farm stand run by this nice Mexican family, and the kids work there sometimes. And after I'd been shopping there every week for a year or so, the owner, whose name is Doug at Folger's Produce, if I give him a plug, he kind of asked me what I did, and I had one of my books in the trunk, so I gave him the book, and he apparently gave it to his kids. And I came in the next time, and the 60-year-old girl is telling me she has a pig inside of her, and that she doesn't let her pig eat anymore. And thank you so much for the book. So kids like it sometimes. They will often instead of calling it a pig, they'll call it someone they don't really like at school or something. But
Bully.
Yeah.
You should write a kid's book for sure. Like
we're working on it for sure. We're working on it. I want to make sure I can really solve the problem. I feel like I've really solved the problem for adults, and I want to make sure I could solve it for kids before I'm not one of these guys that just wants to write a book to make money.
Yeah. I mean, you're giving. I think I'm looking at your website right now. Like, Never Binge Again, free book. Is that right? Like, you're not giving that away for free, right?
We do. We offer the Kindle book for free.
Oh, nice.
And the Audible and the paperback are for a charge, but the Kindle book is for free. My business model has always been, whatever business I've been in, I give an awful lot of things away for free because, first of all, it's a great advertisement. I find that a percentage of people come and they want to use the paid services, but also, I've got a solution.
You're on a mission, though. I mean, this is your mission.
Exactly. I don't have children myself, so I want to make a difference in the world. I'm 57 soon, and while I'm here and active and energetic, I'm going to make a difference, and so that's why people can get it for free at the website.
I love it. I do have kids, and I think the hard part I'm going to follow you on social media right now because I just found your Instagram. The hard part for me is just knowing these things, right? Like, just taking a different approach to parenting, because you have all these different books about how to parent correctly, but it's not like we're born with that instinct. You're basically programmed that, from your childhood about what you experienced and what you think is right or wrong. And then, if you're an adult and you're struggling with binge eating, and let's say you never really fully solved that, and now your kid sees you doing the same, they start picking up on some of the habits. It's like, I don't know. I just think I love the fact that you're doing this type of work, and that you have this great book, Never Binge Again, and it helps, people look outside of themselves as the problem and give it a name, the pig, and be able to help them with their addiction, and then they can take these practices and help them with their kids. I think it's amazing.
Thanks, Trey.
Yeah, buddy.
I'm
putting the plug in there.
You are. Thank you. Thanks for the support.
Yeah, man. I think anytime someone's out there doing great work like this, and you have a goal, you're on a mission. You want to help a ton of people, and free Kindle book, that's huge. That's a lot of value in that. I think people should get out and get it. But like we were talking about, right? Like, where else can people go? What is the website called?
Oh, well, listen, if you are interested in what we're doing, what you really should do is start at the website and click the big red button, neverbingeagain.com. Click the big red button. In addition to the free book, you'll get a free set of food plan starter templates. So, whether you are trying to eat low carb or high carb, or keto or whole foods plant-based or point counting or calorie counting, whatever you're doing, we wanted to show you a set of simple rules that might work for you. And in addition to that, I recorded a whole bunch of full-length coaching sessions because I know this sounds really weird and harsh in the abstract. Like, why is there this psychologist on Trey's show talking about a pig inside of him? But in practice, it's a very compassionate, life-giving system. And I want them to hear that. So they'll get that all free. Just neverbingeagain.com, click the big red button and sign up for the reader bonus list. That will lead you to our free readers forum. It will lead you to the podcast. It will lead you to the coaching services and books and workbooks that we offer. So let neverbingeagain.com and click the big red free stuff button.
I love it. I love it. I'm sorry. I'm looking at things right now. I just think it's amazing. And you have like blogs on here that, I mean, they go back quite a bit here too. I mean, we're talking about 2015, you got blogs here.
I've been doing this for 5 years. We've got hundreds of podcasts. I find that what's most helpful to people is either a success story or a actual live demonstration of how the system works. And so I'm always getting people to record their sessions with me and putting them out. And it's I think we have 600 pieces of content out there now.
That's a lot of content. That's awesome. Besides the million, right? Helping a million people, is there another legacy that you want to be known for?
Well,
it's a pretty big legacy, but
I suppose in the long run, I wonder if I might have some impact on legislation to regulate the food industry. It's shameful what's allowed to go on. Sure. For example, I remember talking to the VP of marketing for a major food bar manufacturer who shall remain nameless so they don't sue my ass. But what they told me was that the major profitable insight that they had was to take the vitamins out of the bars because they were expensive and making the bars taste bad. And instead they put the money into the packaging to make them look healthy instead. So they made them all vibrant and multicolored and shiny. And if you think about it, a multicolored, shiny food source in nature indicates an availability of a variety of different micronutrients and antioxidants. So that's why they tell you to eat the rainbow. Have a salad with purple cabbage and green lettuce and red tomatoes and blueberries and yellow carrots. You're getting a diversity of nutrients, and there seems to be an evolutionary mechanism in our brain that responds to those colors in order to get those nutrients, but they're faking us out. Sure. They're pretending like it's there and it's not really there for a profit. I remember doing studies on salad dressings and looking at, they're really just gobs of fat and salt and oil that these salad dressings were made up of. And they were trying to figure out what ingredients they could add to it that would make people feel good about eating them. So here are gobs of fat and salt and oil with vitamin E. Here are gobs of fat and salt and oil with oatmeal in it. Yeah. There's no one company that you can really point to. It's really the whole industry that's
sure.
Yeah, there's a good
like you said, it's going to take legislation, right? It's not going to,
I think it's going to take legislation, and I don't really have a history with that or expertise with that. So that would be a major project for me to undertake. And I think I need to have a much bigger platform to be able to make that happen. So for right now, I would be content with 1 million people a year to stop overeating. But, if I could get people if I can get them to eat more by design than by impulse, then I think the food companies would come along. So I think right now the food companies are winning because they trigger the reptilian brain and, they trigger this fuck it response. And they'll say, just give me the whole bag, right? Screw just one chip, give me the whole bag. But I think that if people could learn the secret of, planning out if they really love potato chips to have one bag of potato chips on Friday at a particular time in a particular place. That you see that's less. That certainly can trigger people with an addiction, but it's a less addictive habit than eating potato chips on whim.
Sure.
Because you're it's like if your kid gets a toy at the toy store on Saturday afternoon after they've been good with their chores. That's you're not anywhere near as likely to spoil the kid than if you give the kid a toy whenever they cry out that they want a toy.
Yeah.
So as a reasonable goal, understanding that I'm probably never going to get these foods eliminated, and I don't even really think we should. I think we fought wars for freedom, and if people, part of life is the ability to choose to be a little self-destructive for immediate term pleasure if you really want to. But I think people need informed consent. I think they need to really know what they're eating.
Consent. Absolutely.
Yeah.
If we can get people, up to snuff on all this knowledge that you have, then I think we affect the companies anyway, right? Because they're going to be practicing. Hopefully, they'll be practicing this in their lives, and this will definitely cut their bottom line if all these people start becoming more conscious about your methods and way to, stop binge eating and take a more holistic viewpoint on their weight. I think that automatically, naturally, the food industry will be affected by that, I would think.
People vote with their wallets.
That's true. Very true. Dr. Livingston, this has been awesome, man. I cannot thank you enough for coming on.
And you didn't say Dr. Livingston, I presume, even one time. Thank you for having me, Trey. It was great. Everybody go to neverbingeagain.com and get a free copy of the book. Click the big red button.